meeting to order. If you would, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, we welcome you to this meeting. We give you honor and acknowledge you as our source of wisdom. As we begin this meeting, we ask that you would guide our thoughts and our actions so that we may govern as you would. Help us to accomplish our work while displaying your character. Amen.
That's a lofty goal. We got one.
Okay. First thing on the agenda would be do we have any changes? I don't think we had any. Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Approval of the consent agenda. Could I get a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carries 5-0. Okay, next on the list would be public appearances. The first would be the business spotlight. Steve Silvio, owner of Mosby Antiques and Artifacts.
Well, thank you all for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I've been in Orange since the late 70s, and I've been in business ever since. For the first so many years, I owned a publishing company, and we were dedicated to Civil War artifacts. So we published books for that rather niche market. Consequently, I didn't need a physical presence. I was largely under the radar here in Orange. And later, about 15, 16 years ago, in the same vein of dealing with that particular market, I opened J.S. Mosby Antiques and Artifacts on East Main Street. So I've been there ever since. Still have a publishing company. We publish a Civil War magazine for collectors. And between the two, I'm pretty busy. So it's been a very good experience here. I've seen in that time a lot of businesses struggle due to the economy, and it's been a blessing that I haven't fallen victim to the same sort of circumstances. It's been largely through the community that has supported me in many ways, very subtly in some. But it's been a successful venue, and I plan on continuing that. The other aspects of the business are that we only have a few employees, but it's not necessary to have more than a couple. So I haven't had to deal with the problems that can come with having a large workforce, which has been pretty much a blessing considering the niche appeal of what I do. And of course, being in this area, because of the history, it's been ideal for what I do. I mean, we're surrounded with Civil War history, as all of you know, and it's been a wellspring of information and inspiration based on that the simple fact of the locale here. And there again, with people in positions here of importance in the community who have been very interested because of their own inclinations toward history. People such as Sam Higginbotham and Angus Green, who was a big help in the past, and many others that I could name who've been very, very helpful, very supportive, and have encouraged me. And so I'm there again, not to wear out the expression, I'm blessed to be here. And I guess that's about it in a nutshell. So again, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for coming,
Thank you,
Steve.
sir. Very well.
So it's still the Northside Trader?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting magazine. I've known Steve for a long time, and now he's joining the ODA so he can have more fun.
I will give you copies.
Okay. Thank you for coming. All right, next would be the presentation of the Smart 911 program. Nikki.
Good evening, members on of the board. Well, I'm excited to finally say that Smart 911 is actually working and in operation. And we've actually used the Smart 911 system since deploying it earlier in July. We wanted to bring it today to show you and citizens how they can sign up to receive Smart 911 services. And if you recall, Smart 911 is a free service that we offer citizens that allows you to provide the first responders and the 911 dispatchers with information that you want to share, such as, do you have a severe allergy? So if you ate a peanut and had an allergic reaction and nobody could dial 911 and couldn't talk, we could see on your profile that you had an allergic reaction and could send the right help to you right away, such as go ahead and send an ambulance and get that going. Or do you have a child who is known to wander or get lost? Now you can provide us a picture and the information about that child, and now we can actually see the picture of the child as opposed to having to wait for a law enforcement officer to get to your house, see that picture, him to come back to his office, make a black and white photocopy, and now somehow how does he get that distributed out to the rest of the citizens or the rest of the people? So again, it's just giving us access to that information right away. It is a free service, and you can sign up to it through the Orange County website. And you simply go to orangecountyva.gov under the 911 department, and then select Smart 911, of course. And it allows you to log on to the Smart 911 profile right there. I'll go ahead and show you an example of a profile. And this is my profile that I have actually built, and you can see that there's a picture of myself. It tells you who I am, where I live. You can see that there's a picture of my daughter. I was able to provide a picture of my house. I can even tell you if I have propane or electric at my house and where all those utilities are located, where the closest hydrant is to my house. What cell phones are actually addressed to me, so I can list multiple cell phones in here. I can put my daughter's cell phone in here, I just haven't done that yet, and tie that to which school she goes to. So if she was to call 911 and not know where she is, and we don't get the address from a cell phone, we can take a decent guess, it's not 100% accurate, that she may be at the school or she may be at this resident, and use some of the technology that we have to pinpoint and locate where she is. Who my emergency contacts are, so if I'm unconscious and I can't talk, you can now reach out to my family and say, hey, by the way, there's been this issue. What kind of vehicle I drive, and if I have any animals, so I was able to provide all that information. Takes about 10 minutes to sign up, 15 to 20 minutes if you want to provide a lot of detailed information, but it's really, really valuable. And when you call 911, the dispatchers out, and I apologize for the blurry screen, it's a bit hard to capture that, but the dispatchers actually now see the Smart 911 profile pop up directly on their screen. And it actually pings and sets off bells and whistles, so we can see that this is there. We've also got the ability to, if you started a cellular phone call with us and you can't talk, say you are being held hostage, we can now actually start a text message conversation through our Smart 911 app that we have on the desktops. So
that comes up whether you use your cell phone or your home
yes,
phone, so it's tied to either one? Yeah,
anything that is tied to your Smart 911 profile. The profile is very, very secure. We can't just go search the database. It is only activated when you call 911. And I'll be honest, there's more information on Facebook about me than there is in the Smart 911 profiles. And that's a big thing that we do get. That now is, what am I revealing? We're not asking for social security numbers. We're not asking for any detailed information. And it's what you want to share. And if you don't want to share anything, that's absolutely fine. And if you do, that's great too. So we have Smart 911, and that goes along also with our Code Red program. And again, just to remind citizens that they can sign up for Code Red too. And you get to that also through the Orange County website under Emergency Communications. And that's what the sign-in for Code Red looks like also. So we're excited, we're happy it's here, we're happy to say we've used it. And we were able to see that this caller had allergies. And when she called 911, she was calling because she was having an allergic reaction. So we're very excited. So thank you.
And this information, like you said, it's locked up in the computers until such time as you call.
Correct, yes. We have no way of ever searching that database. It's only activated when you call 911.
Probably the most important, a lot, is the medical information.
Yes, there is a lot of HIPAA information. That's why we do keep it private. And again, it's what the citizens want to provide to us.
Is there an opportunity for special, I guess I'd call it special instructions? I had a lady ask me a couple of weeks ago, I guess it's the front door of her house is not usable. And I don't know whether it's nailed shut or a piece of furniture in front of it or whatever. So that the only access, or at least easy access, is, you know, I don't know her house, but it appears to be sort of on a side that you wouldn't expect. Could she communicate that to
Yes.
sufficiently so it would?
Yep.
I mean, I know you can.
Went into the address. You can see how many people live there, what color my house is, where the bedrooms are located. I've added a photo, so you can see what my house looks like, where my heating information, fuel, where you want to find my gas shut off, and access information. I'd like to provide additional information on how to find this address, or is there any additional? So it does allow you to do that.
You guys said we're on the system. My wife put everything in and did exactly what you said, because my mother-in-law lives in her basement, and she put in side entrance, separate, the whole 9 yards. So very user-friendly for putting the information.
Doesn't take long to fill it out.
No, not at all. So, and I'd like to credit Peggy McDaniel, my communications supervisor. Unfortunately, she had a family emergency today and couldn't be here to present. But she is the one who deserves full credit for getting this program up and running. And she'll probably be reaching out to everyone here and Fire and Rescue to start the community outreach portion of this. So, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right. Next then, we would have the Office on Youth Quarterly Report. Alicia.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for letting me come talk about the Office on Youth again. The snapshot we provided, you can tell we're kind of in planning mode. It's been kind of quiet activity-wise for the Office on Youth, but we have a lot of things that are beginning to come up. But I did want to talk to you about a few things and give you some numbers. Our crime control this year, at the end of fiscal year 14, we had 46 community service referrals, 35 successful completions, and they all completed 1,068 hours of service. We had 12 substance abuse assessment and treatment referrals, 65 completed sessions, and 15 successful release completions. So we have kids that carry over from year to year. Child-specific services, which again are psychological evaluations, anger management evals, sex offender treatment, anything that's not substance abuse or community service. We had 16 new referrals, 11 successful completions. And we're currently finishing up our first Thinking for a Change group, which is now on our VJCCCA plan that will hold twice a year. So we're very excited about that. The instructor said the students were great. They came a long way during the 14-week session. And all of our sessions and everything, for a grand total of $18,674, we were able to provide services to that many children. So we're very pleased with that. Our school supply drive is in progress. You might have seen some of our collection bins out throughout the county. We've had lots of phone calls about the distribution dates. We are partnering with Lake of the Woods Church this year, so people can come to our office from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, the week of July 25th through 29th, or if they're on the eastern end of the county, they can go to the Lake of the Woods Church from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. So it gives them a little bit more flexibility so they can make sure their kids start their school year off right. As far as CSA is, we're still working on the correction plan, and I wanted to thank you guys for supporting us and reaching out and trying to help find a FAT member. We have received a couple applications, and so we will be starting interview processes, and hopefully we'll appoint someone very shortly. So we'll have that taken care of for the audit. And lastly, I just want to talk to you about Michael's gift. We have opened up requests again, so we are very happy. We have also received numerous requests. We have a couple upcoming fundraisers. One is a womanless beauty contest, so if you know any man who wants to dress up for us to make a fool of themselves, so and win prizes for their wives, because we're doing it February 7th, and they can give these prizes to their wives for Valentine's Day. We're also doing a jailbreak again in March, so if you'd like to participate and be one of our jailbirds, we'd be happy to have you. And lastly, we're very, very excited about Michael's gift. We received a $10,000 check yesterday from the Tracy Webb Memorial Foundation. So that really boosted our numbers significantly, so we can help children within the community to do what they need to do. So we're very, very excited about that.
Who's the jailbreak going to be sponsoring this year?
Michael's gift again.
Michael's gift again?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
One of the things we talked about, we had met with the Charlottesville, I don't remember the full name of it, I apologize, foundation, to set up an endowment for Michael's gift. And one of the things she told us, we would probably need about $10,000 to start. So we were thinking of putting that in there if we do the jailbreak and another thing. So we have that going on, and people can donate to that. Plus we do little fundraisers here and there. So we're trying to make sure the program just continues. So we're very excited.
You could set a higher bail number for some members, say at the other end of the county or something.
Well, I think what we're going to do is you can either, we need to figure out how to do, you pay to get them out or you pay to keep them in.
That's not a good introduction, Mark. Just to let you know that you're loved.
Glad to know I was missed.
You might raise more money if you paid
Pay to keep them in. That's what we're thinking and we're hoping. So we're working on that and trying to figure out how the best way we can do that. So.
I don't know we can be included in that. Might not be meeting for a few weeks.
Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks. Okay, with that, we move on to public comment. Is anybody signed up?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. In that case, we will move to board comment.
I'd like to welcome our new member. Good working with you again, Mark.
Thank you, sir.
Deja vu all over again.
That's right, you look good sitting there.
You
I
moved-
bet I look
you
good
moved
sitting
some-
here.
Last time you were sitting here, so.
Well, we're up here.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Just glad to have you. Okay. We'll move on then to the action items. First would be employee health and wellness proposal from Sedgwick. Brian.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I received a proposal that's in your agenda package from Sedgwick Racquetball Club to participate in the county's pilot health and wellness program. This partnership would emulate the arrangement we've worked out with Anytime Fitness, whereby the county would reimburse an employee who has 25 visits to the racquetball club. I met with Rodney Sedgwick, and he's making some improvements to the club, particularly from a, I guess, equipment standpoint, so that people, besides the racquetball, there's going to be ellipticals and other types of fitness machines. And so recommendation, if the board is inclined, is to enter into the same written agreement between Sedgwick Racquetball Club and the county, and then employees could participate in this, and we would reimburse them under the current arrangements with Anytime.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Next, we would have a resolution for speed study and safety signage on 621. Brian?
Yes, sir. We've requested that VDOT conduct a speed study and installing various safety signage on Route 21, Mine Run Road. I'll check with Allison. Are we correct on the language in the resolution? There was some question, I think, on the right road names. We got it taken care of.
Yeah, there's a change, I think,
Yes,
yeah.
I apologize, I wasn't up to speed.
There
on
was
that,
a
so-
second one sent out.
Okay. So the recommendation is the board adopt the resolution as drafted.
So move.
Second?
Okay. Any further discussion?
Actually, yes, I happened to go by, talk to the neighbor, the gentleman that had requested this. Later on in the day, when I was going back home, he was trying to turn into his driveway. A truck came along behind him and went to pass as he was turning left into his driveway. That's one of the reasons for taking away that passing zone, is they've had numerous occasions where people have run off the road and everything else, so it is truly a safety hazard.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. And the last action item would be the approval of the lease agreement for Rescue Station 21. Stephanie?
Good evening. In June, we released a solicitation requesting space for lease for Rescue Station 21. We requested at least 2,000 square feet to include a garage, workspace, lodgings, and a restroom, and services such as ground maintenance, snow removal, internet connection, and the ability to remodel if we needed to do so. We received 2 responses, and after reviewing them, we feel that the proposal presented by Wilson Homes is the best fit for the county. This is a to-be-built property, so we get a wonderful opportunity to really mold it from the ground up to best suit our needs. And the price proposed is $12 a square foot, which is half of the other proposal that we received. So it seemed like a very good value. Any questions?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
in the $12, I assume that does not include any utilities or insurances or anything, so it's not
Correct.
it's a,
Or furnishings.
right, okay.
Location?
It is at 522 and 20.
It's actually close to Edwards Store area, right there, Tower Road.
Tower Road and 20.
Yep.
Tower and 20. And the schedule, I mean, have you had discussions about when this would happen and the like?
It's supposed to be completed in January or February, and allowing us to move in a little bit after that. We talked about a 3-year lease with the possibility to renew for an additional 2 years.
And I believe they've broken ground on the structure.
Just, if I could, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if you recall, the motivation to do this is that the current facility is functionally obsolete. It really is not a good working environment. And we were searching for maybe an alternative, kind of an intermediary step, while the board looks into building a new station to serve this area. We looked at a co-location with Mine Run Volunteer Fire Department for any number of reasons. That wasn't meeting, I guess, some expectations, and so the idea was maybe go out and see what the market, the private sector could provide us some temporary space, and that was the reason for the solicitation and why you're here today. That's why there's a 3 plus 1, maybe a 5-year window. And I think from a capital facility standpoint, we should know fairly soon in the next couple of years of where we stand with building that station. But I just wanted to revisit that while we're here today.
And budget impact, how do you, what's your sense of, are we gonna see a supplemental request, or are you gonna find a way to do this, or what's your thinking at the moment? I'm not asking for.
The board has already set some money aside, but obviously as we move forward in future years, that we would be approaching the board for the cost of the lease. You know, we're already paying utilities in an older building. I anticipate our utility costs would probably be controlled somewhat because of a more modern building.
Sure.
So we already have those costs. What we would be approaching you for would be the cost of the lease.
And is the 2,000 square feet, is that about what you think we're gonna end up with and need in the final?
What we tried to do is keep the large enough that it can function properly, but at the same time, because we are paying by the square foot, to keep that down. One nice thing that this option offers is it's actually gonna have 2 bays, so that whether we allowed Mine Run to put a fire truck in, or we put a second ambulance in, there's some different options here that I think are gonna be beneficial to the county in a variety of different ways.
So 2 bays, there's not a lot of living or office type space then associated with it, if you're gonna have 2 bays within the 2,000 square feet.
The living space is adequate. Again, this is a temporary solution,
Sure.
and again, we tried to keep the square footage down to control cost. Obviously, we could have gone bigger. We had a blank slate, but we felt with, essentially we have 2 people on duty. Every once in a while, we would have a third there. This is more than adequate. It's probably very similar to what they're living in now. But the biggest thing is it's going to be a new, modern, updated facility.
And what about the site? How does that fit in your planning and your coverage? I mean, is it
What it's
better?
doing-
I mean, mean, it seems to me that you probably are improving access if you're
Well,
moving
what
from
it's
where we are
doing
today.
is it's filling that void between the town of Orange and, our current location, and the other option was further down Route 20 towards, Lake of the Woods. And what it did is it created a void essentially in that 522 area. This being right on Route 20 is obviously gonna, improve response times. Being a mile or two up the road towards the town of Orange is gonna, again, allow us to provide better service in that Route 522 corridor, or even towards the town of Orange. 'Cause our two biggest EMS areas in the county are gonna be the town of Orange and Lake of the Woods. And,
Do we know anything about the zoning and all of that? Is that in order, or are we facing rezoning or SUPs or any kind of process like that as far as we know?
To my knowledge.
not to our knowledge, but obviously, we work with the building official and the zoning if we could move forward, or have permission to move forward with this.
Property's already zoned commercial.
Oh, it is? Okay. I don't know exactly which property they're talking about there, so, okay.
I believe he's met everything
Okay.
that's needed, not only for the structure itself, but to be.
That's good. It
for public safety.
probably would not be good for us to sign a lease committing to do something on property that's not quite zoned the way it needs to be.
I think permits have been issued up to include zoning and building permits for
Okay,
this
good.
structure, so. One other thing on the financing, if I recall, and I'm looking back to the Director of Finance, the board had agreed to capitalize a temporary solution with Mine Run at, I think, a project cost of about $60,000 that we were able to
Right.
pull out of the FY14 budget, carried that forward. And so if you do the basic math of 24,000 exclusive of utilities, then that base amount will carry us at least through 3 years, give or take. And so that money is restricted to be able to pay for that in a sense. Am I getting that right, John?
That's correct. The only upfront cost we would have is some furnishings for the building itself, but those aren't gonna be astronomical.
So we've got a good run at paying for the lease payment for at least a couple, 3 years, before we would look at the general fund supporting it.
It's in a new structure that meets all the present day life safety codes.
Okay.
So moved.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, carries 5-0. Okay, appointments to boards, commissions, and committees.
Still looking for the library.
Yeah, me too.
Well, know the feeling.
Anyone out there that knows someone that would like to be on a library board, please let us know.
Yes.
Who lives in District 4?
If who lives in District 4, yes.
Or District
Or 2, or
Yeah.
3.
All right. Well, if we have none, then we'll move on to the discussion items. First would be the proposed ordinance designating the roads in Lake of the Woods as highways.
The purpose of this is Lake of the Woods, as a private thing, can only fine people for traffic violations a maximum of $50. That doesn't make, whether he's going 20 miles over the speed limit or not, that's what he's limited to. Lake of the Woods desires to be able to, and since they have conservatives of the peace as their security force, they can issue a ticket that basically is a normal traffic citation that would be dealt with by the county courts. Lake of the Woods has worked with the Commonwealth Attorney and determined that this is feasible. The one issue is to be able to do that, the roads have to be designated as public highways for purposes of traffic enforcement. That would require an ordinance change, and so today we're only looking at the possibility of setting a public hearing date. We met with the Lake of the Woods general manager, one of their directors, and the sheriff yesterday. He was concerned about the fact that he might now get requests to come in and run traffic in the lake. And so we were very specific, and the lake is preparing their own resolution, which would be done before we come to a public hearing, that would basically say, yeah, we're asking for a designation, but we do not require the sheriff to come in and patrol our roads. And that's the purpose of this today. You've seen the resolution. The resolution was discussed yesterday with Mark Amos, and he had a couple of minor changes that we've implemented, and that would basically set it up such that
One question I had, Lee, was is this intended to be limited just to the 20 miles an hour over the speed? No other citations of any, no reckless driving or any other kind you're going to narrow?
apparently, with regard to reckless driving and drunk driving, the sheriff already has the opportunity and would be involved in that. But anything over 20 miles an hour is becomes the reckless driving.
Right.
But in fact, if they have one, rather than having the sheriff come in to have to process that, they, as conservative of the peace, can issue a ticket, and the ticket then has to be processed down at the court, along with the security force going down to testify, just as they would anywhere else.
How do you process something now?
If they get a ticket, they basically get processed by the association's own legal and compliance committee. They come before a committee, and the committee would basically say, you've got a fine. They can pay the fine without coming to the committee, but they do have an adjudication process or a public, an opportunity to appeal if they said, no, I don't think I was going that fast, et cetera, et cetera. They can do that. But there is a public process for them to deal with any kind of a fine.
Okay. Now, the fines, if we do this, the fines still stay within.
No, the
Or-
money
or
then
they
would,
go-
the money would then go to the county.
Okay. The question on that is, are those fines included in general revenues for the lake?
No.
Okay.
No, they, I mean.
Careful what you ask for.
If we find somebody for going 10 miles over the speed limit and he gets a $25 fine, that goes into the Lake of the Woods coffers. But if he issues a regular traffic ticket and it goes to the county, then the county and the court gets the money.
Okay.
Any sense of the number that we're talking about? I mean, is it on a monthly basis or annual basis, whatever? Have any statistics
do you have
at
an
all?
answer, Phil?
20 a year.
20 a year?
And I assume your officers have the proper equipment in terms of radar or whatever they're gonna use that are that in compliance with whatever the state code requires in order to.
Yes, calibration to the requirement. Yes.
And they will basically have to meet whatever the court requires as a standard.
Just one other thing, what if you change security companies? Will this continue?
Go ahead. You can.
Yes, we would intend it to continue. By the way, I'm Phil Rodenberg, I'm the general manager of Lake of the Woods. But in all cases, the officers would have to be special conservatives of the peace, okayed by the sheriff, sworn in by the circuit court judge. So some of those officers might carry over, there might be others, but they still have to meet that criteria every single time.
And is there training requirement or some other thing that allows them? I mean, I'm okay with it, but I'd hate to see us forget to check some little box in terms of compliance and therefore have a.
The Commonwealth attorney came on site to go over that with us, and she was satisfied with that. She just sees
Okay.
this technical issue of being a highway before we could go on.
And this is for, not for Orange County Sheriff deputies to go in and patrol.
No, specifically.
For conservators to do.
That's correct. And we feel like we can handle this ourselves. We just feel like it would be, it would help keep the roads safer if there was more of a penalty than the $50 ticket, especially for this particular issue, 20 county over the speed, posted speed limit.
I guess the county, question for the county
The
attorney.
new one didn't make it in there. That's the old one.
This is the old one?
That's the old one. The new one that we drafted didn't get into the book.
The new one basically specifically states that the sheriff is not required to do that. Do you have a copy of that? I may have one. I don't think I have mine.
Yeah, we specifically added a couple of clauses that say, one, Lake of the Woods is not requesting that the sheriff patrol,
Requiring.
and that the sheriff is not going to patrol, where actually the amended ordinance has those two paragraphs in it.
And the draft ordinance, or the draft resolution that the Lake of the Woods is preparing, they've already have a resolution saying they want to issue a uniform, a regular traffic ticket for speeds over 20 miles an hour above the speed limit. And they will do another resolution requesting the designation. And in that, they say very specifically that they do not want the sheriff to patrol the roads. So there's no workload issue for the sheriff.
Question for the county attorney. Any liability issues that you see at all? I mean, I don't,
No, this doesn't, all this does is authorize law enforcement. So special conservators of the peace are by definition law enforcement officers. All this does is authorize those law enforcement officers to enforce state laws and local laws on those private roads.
and the resolution is going to only designate a highway. We're not gonna get into the issue of whether it's just the 20 miles an hour over
No,
or reckless driving or anything.
What
Our-
happens the minute it's designated as a highway for traffic purposes, then all traffic laws that apply on Route 20 would apply in Lake of the Woods.
Okay, that's what I thought. So
Yes.
our resolution only does the designation.
Yeah, all we're gonna do is, it's gonna be an ordinance, all our ordinance will do is make the designation, and what that does is for law enforcement purposes, makes Lake of the Woods streets just as
That's
subject to traffic laws.
So DUIs would be,
Those are technically criminal matters outside of traffic laws. Those are actually a separate criminal section, so the DUIs, if you can prosecute now.
And we would just set and this would just be the decision to set the public hearing, because it has to be an ordinance.
What is the speed limit in the lake?
25, some areas are 15. And those areas that are 15, I mean, I got a section that I go 15 to get home off of the main drag, and that's a challenge to. I mean, I'm not comfortable, even with my little red light going. I'm not
Hey,
comfortable
Phil, you
going
know where to
faster
set
than
up
that.
first. Okay,
So I would, what would be the good date for the public hearing?
It would have to be at least 2 meetings out in order to meet advertising requirements.
so
It
the
can
second
be-
meeting in September.
First meeting in September.
First meeting in September.
First meeting in September?
I can look up the date for you. It's September 9th.
September 9th, and I would move we would set September 9th as a public hearing for this ordinance change.
I'll second that, but I have a question. Can the board get their resolution and everything done? That okay?
There's a plan to be for the 20th
yeah,
of
that
this
would be
month.
the caveat.
Yeah. Okay.
And they would come back for the public hearing when we have their final resolution requesting it.
My second stands.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have proposed ordinance prohibiting the distributing of handbills, soliciting contributions, or selling merchandise of services in highways. Tom?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was asked to draft up a proposed ordinance doing exactly what you read, which is preventing people from on the roads. I don't know if you've ever seen people out there panhandling out of the median strip or having passing buckets. State law allows us to prohibit that. And so this is just literally lifted out of state code. It would prohibit people from fundraising, collecting money along the roads in the county.
Is it all road? That was, I wasn't sure whether it was, I mean, let's do it by number. I assume all the primary roads would be included. What about
All-
the 600s, the 700s?
All the
and-
roads, all the county roads would be included. Because, again, it shall be unlawful, we just discussed highways. It's same definition. So, technically, Lake of the Woods could enforce it as well if they wanted to, because if we make them a highway.
But they could do it inside the lake.
Right. But, so it basically applies to anything that's designated a highway, which in the county would be the 600s, all of the secondary roads, all of the roads in the county.
So anything that's state maintained.
Yes. Or any private roads we designate as highways.
Oh, okay.
The,
See, we have the unilateral authority. Lake of the Woods requested it, but this board actually has the unilateral authority to designate private roads as highways if it chooses to do so. So it would be anything that we've designated, which by definition will be the state-maintained roads, and then any additional private roads that we designate as highways.
How does this affect all of these garage sales and yard sales and the like that you see? I mean, you know, some of them have signs that are, you know, about this far from the pavement. And
Well-
while the actual selling is not, I mean, I assume this is in the right of way. I mean, what is
Yeah,
there?
if you look at the very bottom of it, 46-85 proposed B, we actually define the highway area, entire width of the road, the street improved, and then the median, the shoulder, and all the way back to the back of the curb. So that
Oh, okay.
if you're in a yard, you're technically not violating it.
Which on a lot of places on Route 20, you're quite a ways back off the road.
what about, a lot of times the fire departments have this, collecting funds, with their boots, how does that, get
It would be
addressed?
prohibited as well.
How about at Booster Park? They collect contributions for different,
Well, in the park would be fine, but they couldn't collect out on the road
no,
either.
that's where they collect, is on the road as you go to park.
Yes, that would be prohibited as well.
What brought this about? Is there
Yeah, there's
An issue?
some, just in the last, few weeks, bunch of, people have been, standing outside Lake of the Woods, with their Feed My Family signs. There's, 2 or 3 that are out there regularly now. I think my best recommendation is just to, take the Willie Sutton approach and make sure that there's no money there for them to collect, but they're out there. I haven't talked to the sheriff about this one, and whether or not, what kind of an enforcement issue this would be. So I'm not really sure what his role in this would be. And frankly, I think that maybe that's something we ought to address before we go further with it.
Well, if that's the reason this came up, I'm just wondering why all this other stuff got lumped in there.
It's either all or nothing, isn't that correct?
Well, we could allow distributions of handbills, leaflets, bulletins, literature, and prohibit solicitation. We're not obligated to do all of it. I just went ahead and did all of the things. Again, this was just a model ordinance I was drafting up. But, so I just included all the things state law would allow so that you guys could discuss what you did and didn't want.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I did talk to the sheriff about the solicitation.
Okay.
At the
Go
same
ahead.
time, I was talking about the roads and things, because as you know, there's a prosecution and there's a law enforcement aspect to each one of these. As far as the solicitation, he's fine with that. He sees that as a kind of a one notice warning to any violator, and, you know, you need to leave the median no longer, we'll come back, and then they would, and Commonwealth's attorney also said that certainly wouldn't see.
So it's
a
not
problem.
that much of an enforcement issue?
The enforcement on the law, and then the prosecution side, at least what they both said is that they're fine with what this would be.
And the way they normally operate is complaint basis. So what's gonna happen is if somebody's complaining, hey, there's this person's, they're not gonna go out there. I don't think they have any intention of routinely trying to catch people. I think it's when they get complaints, it gives them a tool to work with.
So if we scratch, 1, out of that,
Can they not enforce it currently as a traffic hazard, a safety hazard?
Well, I think they could theoretically, I mean, but if I'm their defense lawyer in court, I'm saying, well, Judge, the state legislature specifically addresses this, and Orange has chosen not to adopt this, and therefore, I mean, it would provide a defense attorney a pretty big avenue of defense, since state law allows us to prohibit the specifics of soliciting and or passing out or selling.
Do we have any information about the experience in any of the surrounding jurisdictions with this, whether they've dealt with it or not dealt with it? Or?
Spotsylvania County dealt with it and was in the process of arresting a firefighter one day for collecting funds for muscular dystrophy. So, yes, it's,
Is there any
get
way
pretty
that,
hairy.
this can, if let's say the firefighters wanted to raise funds somewhere, that they could do get a permit to do this or get it waived? Could you write the ordinance such that, for legitimate fundraisers like the firefighters?
Well, and I had a discussion with somebody today about that. Is certainly an option, is to write in a permit provision that anybody can come get a permit.
I would feel a lot better if we had a permit provision on it.
Then what is the basis for denying a permit?
Well-
If the guy with the sign comes in and says, give me a permit.
You can get 501c3.
Well, I think the theory would be the homeless beggar isn't gonna take the trouble of driving down here to get a permit, whereas the firefighters probably would go to.
Right.
I don't
The
object to.
501's not going.
I don't object to dealing with the problem that you have. I object to dealing with a whole bunch of problems we don't have.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Won't vagrancy
I would
rules
like to
take
see
care of that?
this as narrow as possible, because you are gonna, and on some of the back roads, you're gonna get into some issues where you know, like where I live, I am to the center of the road, so there becomes some real issues about what Orange County can tell me I can do. And I don't think the back roads are the issue. I'm guessing we're mainly talking about primary roads where nobody sits back in a corner somewhere with a sign
So
saying.
you got one car passing every
Right.
half hour.
Well, no, the
So-
primary roads is where it can be a safety hazard.
Well, I think there are a number of questions that we should research and maybe discuss a little bit further. Should we
I
limit it to
didn't
certain
plan
kinds
to
of
go
roads?
any further
Yeah.
than that this evening. It's just
Yeah.
to get thoughts on this and see what other things we might be looking at for purposes of.
I'll give you a simplest solution. Tell the people in the lake don't give them any money and then.
We're doing that. We're doing that.
I saw one of them eat McDonald's fries the other day, so, standing out there saying we need food, and they were eating McDonald's fries, so.
Yeah, and I've actually had at least one member tell me that, they offered to buy him a hamburger, that's not what they wanted.
Well, maybe something that's structured a little bit more narrowly in scope, but also primary highways, or certain distance from primary, some type of a construction like that might. Because I'm concerned about
You
primary
get the little
highways.
people that sell roses on the side of the road.
I know, this is a slope that I'm not sure
That's
we
why I
understand.
said, that's why I'm
Well,
asking. I mean,
It's a very urban rule and a very
Yeah.
unurban.
no, as I say,
Yeah.
I would
Y'all
be
are more
much
urban,
more
right.
comfortable, tailoring it more narrowly and also providing for a permit process for legitimate fundraisers.
Well, let me ask one last question. Since we were doing things designating Lake of the Woods roads as highways, doesn't that road proceed all the way to 3?
To the,
At the
Southern-
gate, there's a dividing line where the public right-of-way is, and I don't think they have been in on Lake of the Woods right-of-way, because I'm sure that the security guys would have bounced them out to the public highway.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I understand the board's direction is, let staff go back and certainly come back with maybe a more tailored ordinance that deals with solicitation for personal benefit, and that other solicitations would be through a permit process, and that we would designate the actual arterial roads, 20, 3, 5, 22, and 15, so as those
33.
those are 33, those main roads, and then any secondary roads that, because I'm thinking of like 600 or higher roads like Flat Run, that's a pretty busy road. Do you want us to dial it in that much, or just leave it in the main?
you're going to run into an issue there. because Goodwin Drive is state maintained road. Goodwin Drive is right next to Route 3, and all they have to do is step out of the one median and over to the double yellow lines. So we're,
Where,
it's a great thought, but all of a sudden I realized you have another state road right there that they would just move their camp.
but if we structured the ordinance to just the solicitation of dollars, or solicitation for personal benefit, not for a group, not for anything, but for personal benefit, then that would dial it in pretty narrow what constitutes panhandling.
Well, except you can do things for personal benefit that aren't panhandling, so that's the only point. I mean, he'll sort of mentioned selling roses, and there's people with fruit stands, and I mean, if you draw it too wide, you're gonna, I think, get into things there's no intention of getting into.
But I'm hearing we drop the sale provision and only keep the solicitation provision. Sales was actually under item sub A3.
Okay,
So
yeah.
you're suggesting
But
strike
also
that.
look at the issue of primary roads, and look at the issues of permits, and see what we can
Well,
create.
I mean, one
From a
suggestion
staffing
maybe, since
standpoint.
we know it's a problem on 3, is we just start with 3 and 20 and 15, and then if we need to add other roads later, we can just designate.
A lot of these problems that are down in the other end of the county never get up in
Right.
this end of the county.
So, maybe.
Well, if you're trying to solicit
See
money,
now,
you
why is
don't
it-
need to stand on 600 where there's nobody there. You need traffic. If you're gonna get money out of 1 out of 100 people, you need a whole lot of hundreds of people.
Something
You
might
might
be,
get shot before you get in.
yeah. Something might be helpful is to scan the ordinances of a couple of
Yeah.
surrounding areas and just see what they say or what they're
I
doing.
just-
Definitely not the place to say.
I actually did. This is pretty, the ones I found that have one, this is pretty
They go
standard.
all, they're all either all in or not.
Well, I actually had a hard time finding smaller jurisdictions that did have one. It
think
was
that's what
mostly
you're
the
hearing.
larger urban jurisdictions that had them, and they were pretty much all in on it.
Let's see what we can do.
One-
I like Ryan's idea of letting staff
Yeah.
take another shot at
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
I'd rather not write in another permitting process if we can, is that tailor this to kind of personal benefit, solicitation for personal benefit, I'm getting generic here, that doesn't otherwise go to a faith-based, nonprofit, service organization, things like that.
Give us
Clearly
the
articulate,
language and we'll look at it again.
and we'll come back to you all with a better package.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. 3-month status report on changes to EMS billing. John and Company. And we break for dinner in 4 minutes and 21 seconds.
I'll speak for 3 minutes 24. Those of you who don't know, my name is Craig Johnson. Welcome back, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, a familiar face.
As you know, in April 1st, we switched from Fidelis billing to Med 3000 billing. And in the process, we took the opportunity to change our address from Fidelis billing to our own financial lockbox, so that when our customers send in their checks, their insurance information, their correspondence, it comes to an address the county now owns. That process, unfortunately, when you deal with the federal government, takes time. So from April through mid-July, that process of changing the address caused some delay in funds. So we've been still receiving funds from Fidelis billing on accounts that occurred prior to April 1. Now that everything's in place with Med 3000, as of mid-July, the funds have started to come in through Med 3000. And in fact, today we just received word that Medicare released a $107,000 check to us today. So that was good news.
That was a tough transport. Where'd we take it?
Well, it was quite a few up.
So there's good news and bad news. Good news is the process is more or less complete. All the mechanisms are in place to receive money and start the process with Med 3000 fully taking the reins of our billing solution and operating. The bad news is I can't give you a lot of figures today because we just started receiving funds a few weeks ago, and those funds haven't made it through the system far enough to us to give you a trend analysis or an estimate on what's to come in the future. We'll tell you that It's gonna take some time to get those funds back up, but on balance, I don't anticipate losing money on this. It's just when to receive that money. Do we receive it in September instead of June or May? It's just the timing of when we're gonna receive those funds is what we're talking about here. So in a few months, we can come back to you with figures and estimates and all the financial information you'd like. But today, we're kind of in transition, and I just wanted to give you an update of what we've gone through since April 1st.
So you said you'd like that new rescue station to be occupied? Let's see those funds.
Also, we have,
We're not foregoing any money. It will be billed, every charge that is incurred during the transition.
Yeah, I guess the question I had, have we added any layers of collection in the process?
we have increased some rates, particularly with mileage. So we'll see some increases based on those assuredly. We do have Ms. Jackie Herrera with Med 3000. She can answer specific questions about the billing and the rates and so forth. Anything?
I think we covered all that a few months ago. Bring the money in.
I want to recognize that the treasurer is certainly very integral to us, Phil's, in working through this lockbox and just the processing. And so certainly, she's been helpful in helping kind of work through this because it was a big transition.
Does she, have you seen any problems with this process?
No, I have not, and Jackie's been very helpful, we haven't been, we will, but they've been very helpful so far.
Okay.
Yeah, I would mention with the lockbox, we've added some security where before it wasn't as secure as it is now. The address is actually a P.O. box essentially connected with a financial institution, so the checks that come through aren't handled except to be deposited into our account. Essentially, scanned for documentation and then deposited into the account, so the security for those funds is increased. And if in the future we ever need to change billing vendors, which hopefully not, we own that address now. We own that lockbox, so we won't have to change our address in the future.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Craig. All right. And that brings us up to 6. So at that point, I guess we should go into closed meeting.
Alrighty. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Orange County desires to discuss in closed meeting the following matters. Discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community. And consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of public body. And consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. And whereas pursuant to sections 22.2, 3711A5 and A7 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be resolved, the Board of Supervisors of Orange County does hereby authorize discussion of aforesaid matters in closed meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are in closed.
I guess we're going upstairs.
Yep.
Are we ready, Allison? Okay. To the best of your knowledge, were the only matters discussed in the closed meeting public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. Roll call.
Mr. White?
Yes, aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Mr. Frame?
Aye.
Mr. Goodwin?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Okay. Brings us back to where we were. Discussion item D, Germanna Wilderness Area Plan. GWAP.
Yeah, GWAP. GWAP.
What's in the agenda package was from the July 29th meeting, and then we just met yesterday, and that information will make it into the next agenda package.
Yeah, I mean, just one quick comment, partly for your benefit, Mark. I mean, we've divided up the planning area into 8 sub-areas, and going through the process pretty much numerically, such that the sub-area plan for 1 is now leaving the steering committee and ready for broader comment. 2 is getting fairly close, 3 is fairly close, 4 we got a lot of work to do on. So we're working through that. And if you don't have it in this package, soon there will be online, if it isn't already, the more complete versions of 1, 2, and 3 at least. So
And when you look at the various areas, like the area that deals with Germana, basically there's very little being proposed for that. Same thing when we get around where the battlefields are. And the same for the Lake of the Woods area, that's pretty much all defined. There's some areas that there may be some changes on, but that's pretty much
that shows
how
the
it
8
goes.
areas right there. Just a
And-
quick reference.
But other areas where we talk about the King property, there'll be a lot more to do with that. So each area has its own characteristics, and we're trying to deal with them individually.
And in developing the areas, one of the things that we try to do is make them relatively homogeneous. They're not purely so, of course, but the Germana area, Area 3, is basically all Germana and Germana Foundation properties. Area 8 is basically Park Service. Area 1 is those existing subdivisions largely.
But there's
But
plenty.
then there's Walmart.
But there's a lot of other things that. And the other, of course, then this all becomes, as a package, becomes a part of the comp plan. And and the comp plan as it's currently drafted provides for this as providing more detail for that area. And it'll have to go through all the comp plan approval process, public hearings. We're trying to do as much as we can now to make sure that everybody sees what's going on as we happen. We don't want to, come in there with a 50-page plan that says, here's what we've got, now you comment on it, because that tends to say, well, we're not participating. We're just getting a chance to comment, and we're really trying to encourage the participation. I do it in my article saying, hey, a new thing on the website, and we're not getting a lot of input, so that concerns me, because I'd rather hear about it early than after we put finishing touches on it.
That's the problem with these things, is getting input before you make a decision. It's easy to get input after you make the decision. Everybody will tell you what's wrong with it.
And it won't be because there's been a lack of trying.
No.
We have pushed it out there. The media's been wonderful, pushed it out the website. County administrator's taken it to no less than 10 different groups and organizations, and we're pushing it out as much as we can, but we're still just not getting.
One of the things that's being proposed as part of this is that the small area plan, which is what this is going to be called, gets adopted into the comp plan formally, and then it triggers some zoning considerations. And so there's likely to be changes to the zoning ordinance that probably will only apply to the area inside that red boundary. But still, there are changes to the zoning ordinance, and that's when you probably get people's attention as well. So,
I'm just off the top of my head guessed that the sub area 4 is going to take quite a lot of time.
that's the one we're struggling with at the moment.
And are you doing anything specific to that one to try to get input that maybe you didn't do on some of the other ones?
I don't know that we know yet. I mean,
we really don't know yet. I think part of this one, obviously, you're going to have the King family probably a lot more engaged than you do landowners in some of the other areas. I'd like to see them all engaged. I mean, we planned for something. He said, no, I'm going to put that in a conservation easement, and it ain't going to be developed forever. We don't want to run into that kind of thing. So some discussion. But I think 4 will probably have far more involvement with the landowner. And because, and we had some discussion about it yesterday, but we're pushing for more commercial, because that's really that's the area that has the biggest potential for larger land blocks that can become business centers or business parks or something like that.
But 4 has some substantial physical challenges, either
Yes.
slopes or wetland areas or, you know, all these kind of floodplains and the like. So it's a lot less acreage that's usable than the eye might first tell you. And that's, planning staff is working on that now, and it keeps getting smaller, not larger. We're working.
We were starting with a couple of thousand acres and we're down into the hundreds now.
Yeah. Actually, if you guys have time at one of the steering committee meetings, it might be good to sit in for a while at one of them just to get the flavor of it, because we're going to end up having to deal with this as a body at some point. So,
Are these steering committee meetings being put on the web at all? I saw the first one that you all did. I watched that one that you all did.
Oh, as far as in
LOW.
no,
I don't think
we're
they're
not
taping.
videotaping.
We're not
taping it?
No.
Okay.
But the products of each of those is showing up on the web as a next iteration. But they are open to the public, and we've got 2 members of the board, the Planning Commission and the EDA, that are on the steering committee. And I think yesterday was the first day we had any very much attention, because we had, I think, 3 or 4 people from Lake of the Woods, because this is the first time we were looking at the Lake of the Woods segment. Whether that's the reason or with some other reason, I'm not sure, but that's.
but the press has been there, I think, to every one of them.
Yeah.
And so it's.
And it gets pushed out to Civic Plus, so anybody that's signed up through the county, you know, just, it gets pushed out to them. There's going to be this meeting.
One of the steps that the steering committee, I guess, came to some consensus on is this reach out. How do you get input? And as you said, you know, input usually is after the fact, and you want input before the fact. But then how do you do an orderly process, keep it going?
To manage it.
To manage it. And what we're going to do, the intent, now the execution is going to be critical, but there's a roster of stakeholders that were interviewed or identified as part of the charrette process: large landowners, institutional, VDOT, power companies, Germana, Community College, Foundation.
Homeowners Association.
Homeowners Association. And as these sections are completed into that kind of final working draft, we will affirmatively send copies out to them, and then say we would like a follow-up, whether it's Lee, Jim, myself, or other members of the steering committee, to make ourselves available to that group to come and explain it, and then hopefully instigate some input on it. Certainly on the King, on that property, because it's pretty much one landowner. There's some others will do that, because that one is kind of more the free form of the potential there. Certainly the National Park Service and some of these other.
Germana.
Lake of the Woods has now been reached out, so that before we go into kind of a comment period for the steering committee, which I think I shared with you, that we're gonna work on a formal comment period in a meeting. We'll try to have as much of input from the identified stakeholders up front. We'll ask, how well we get it and what the quality will that input be. We're definitely gonna make the effort.
Okay. Anything else on that?
Yeah, just one other thing, and this is it's related directly to the area plan. You all are having a joint meeting with the school board on the 26th. We're gonna do that at the end of the meeting at 7 o'clock. This is the standing annual meeting. We're going to have this Germana Wilderness Area Plan as a briefing for the school board. I've talked to the chairman, kind of outlined kind of three elements. We'll also talk about the capital improvements program and what the schools are doing with that. And then certainly staff will be kind of providing with the board identified, our perspective on next year's budget cycle and how we're going to approach it, at least from a county general government standpoint, because the schools are certainly in this kind of intermediate period where there's not an interim superintendent. So those are the 3 items, but this will be a good opportunity to brief the school board on this work.
Okay. All right, next then would be the Orange County legislative priorities.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I bring to you to this just a proposal. I know during the last General Assembly session, VACO would send out alerts, legislative alerts, or any number of means of getting to your inbox or my inbox. And we worked out a process I think is a good one, is if I'm gonna respond back yes or no based on how many of, if I get at least 3 of you pointing me in a direction. Thinking through to this next General Assembly session, was wondering if it might be possible for me to develop just a draft of kind of some guidance, so that when I communicate to our legislators, I'm saying, as you recall, this is covered or at least anticipated under this priority for the Board of Supervisors. I gave you a couple examples, VACO's priorities. Goochland gets into real specificity. That's not where I'm going, but I wanted to give you an example of a priority approach that a similarly situated locality has used. And I just like your guidance. I think having kind of a sheet of priorities that you all work through and agree to is a good template for me then to communicate positions on bills as the hurry and hustle of the assembly goes.
Are you thinking of creating something similar to the VACO example that's here for us?
Yes.
It could be the same
Or similar.
priorities, but.
It's not gonna be far off from that, I would
Or
imagine.
similar to their policy positions,
But it would
not
be-
their legislative requirements, but their policy positions.
But it would be what you all wanted to declare as your priorities.
Yeah, I think what they did with the policy positions, I think something like that, similar to what we've done in the past. So that, or something like with VACO, something short and sweet. Because I'm thinking a lot of legislative eyes glazed over in this 4-page thing that Goochland sent out.
I think when VACO comes and asks for a specific comment on a specific piece that's coming before a committee or before the either floor, when you hit them that because they're about to vote on it, that's probably far more likely to get their attention.
And there's no substitute from what we did last time for that, I don't think. I mean, you've
No.
got to react, on the specifics of the bill at the moment.
And agreed, and I'm not proposing we go away from that. I would like to have and if I can keep this to 1 page, I
Yeah,
think that's, in that say, the board's position on XYZ bill is this, which aligns with this priority as adopted by the board, so that there's some connection between an action that you've done to establish these priorities. And then I would attach a copy of the board's priorities to the email responding to this. If everybody's okay with that, I'll take the sense of the board that let me work up something. Now's the time to do this because we're, getting, the bills are actually starting to be filed. And so they get it cranked up here in January. So
There are a couple of ones in the specifics that Goochland had that I sort of I liked.
I'm not proposing you all introduce.
No, I'm just saying, but there were a couple of them that really looked like.
One on tall grass and occupied.
Well,
property.
no, that wasn't.
That would be in District 5.
No, not in District 5.
That was
no.
actually approved.
Yeah, was it really?
All localities can now regulate tall grass.
But this was occupied property.
Right, what used to be unoccupied, and then it was only specific jurisdictions could do occupied. Somebody said, why don't you just let everybody do it?
Yeah, let's see.
Don't you grass or Henry will get it. That's right.
Well, there's one here that I particularly did not like from Goochland. And to require the political parties to pay for their primaries. I didn't like that at all. I figured that, that's just one to me that seemed like.
Well, one I liked it, but I'm sure it won't ever go anywhere, is number 14, where they require a fiscal impact before they introduce a bill.
Oh, I like that.
I like that, but,
Never happened.
I was an analyst
You'd like
once.
Congress to have a balanced budget.
Yeah, I'd like that too. I'd just like them to have a budget.
That's right. Like to have them show
They
up.
can't even do that.
Can we send any of these to feds?
Yeah.
All right, well, work us up something and then we can take a look at it and refine it.
Yes, sir. Okay.
All
I have
right.
that direction.
All right, and that would bring us then to the supervisor's financial policies. Once again, Brian?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at your July 22nd meeting, we brought forward some financial policies for you all's consideration. This was a compilation of work from your board retreat, prior financial policies, particularly with our reserve funds, and also recommendation by our staff and our financial advisors, Davenport, which Davenport scrubbed the language, and I also put in some other language so that we would be, I guess, aligned with the way that bond rating agencies view these policies. We brought the draft. Certainly there were some questions and observations. The board deferred it until night to allow interested board members to meet with staff. We did meet with Mr. White, who we went through and made some edits to, but it also brought forward maybe I guess a larger, I don't want to interpose what Mr. White was saying, but that there was maybe a good opportunity to work these policies through as really a communication device for taxpayers, as well as setting some direction, strategic direction as far as finances are concerned. And so that it may be appropriate to have Mr. White, maybe one other board member, kind of an ad hoc group, work through with staff and getting this kind of tuned in and scrubbed well. Also, and then whatever changes are done, having our financial advisors go back through it to make sure we stay on track with that.
If we got enough time, I got a couple of comments about a few of the things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need another couple of iterations, and rather than try to do that as an entire board, I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity to get Mark engaged in the conversation. So, and I've dug into it a little bit already. So, one of the proposals I would have is that we take any comments anybody has, and then between Mark and I and staff, we try to bring you back something that's a little bit closer for discussion sometime in the next few meetings, whenever we can get it.
Right, we're under no time requirement other than we're always subject to review by the bond rating agencies, and having these in place is probably better sooner than later.
But there's some real issues to wrestle with in terms of CIP and what is our basic approach and philosophy to that, and debt. What is our basic approach and philosophy there? And as we talked at the retreat, where do we want to position ourselves from the standpoint of county services? You know, there are counties, I think Lee County is the one example I looked at, that does the bare minimum legally required, period, no matter what it is. We're not quite there, but we're also not Arlington County that spends $35 million on Parks and Rec. Our total general fund's $35 million. And so there's the Goldilocks position for us somewhere in there that we need to try to articulate.
A little background on Lee. I have a friend of mine that I see at the VACO meeting all the time, and when he first took his chair 8 years, or coming on 8 years ago, the first question that he was asked was permission to borrow money to make payroll.
I have a policy for you on that one.
Yeah, there were various policy changes that immediately followed. But
yeah. Well, I mean, these are things that I think, as Brian said, my feeling was they give guidance to us in our deliberations, but they're also it's an important communication opportunity to the constituents. It says here's what we think the county wants and needs, and we're going to try to make decisions along these lines. I mean,
I don't think this is the document we reference to our constituents, but they're not going to read this.
Oh no.
Well, it sets the. I mean, you can cite it in your discussions with constituents, campaign literature, or anything else. But
well, it's only the first 6 pages that are these things we're talking about.
Well,
after that, it gets.
I mean, I like the one we say maintained at existing levels and standards of service, as opposed to adding new things.
Right.
And that's a problem I got to deal with probably more than you guys do, because I'm getting requests to, well, why can't the county do this for us? And so it's not.
That's somewhere up north.
Well, I mean, you know, but the point is, when the District One boundary gets all the way to 522, then we'll have a different perspective on things.
And that, Dave, is probably coming.
It's fairly close.
I used that about a year ago,
I've been-
and I
I've been-
almost
I've
saw
been
some
using
heart
it
attacks
pretty
take place.
regularly lately.
Anyway, but you know, just like, I'm not anxious to solve every problem with a new ordinance or something like that either, so. But
No,
there's,
that's right.
we're talking a capital equipment replacement and maintenance plan versus a CIP. That's can you explain what we're doing here?
What page is that on?
This is on page 5 and item number 7. We prepare and annually update the capital equipment replacement and maintenance plan. And I'm saying, how does that differ from our CIP?
I'll take a shot at it. I'm gonna look at our finance director to make sure. When we speak of capital equipment, these are things that are gonna be more than $5,000,
Mm-hmm.
either collectively or individually. Let's use defibrillators,
Okay.
for example. We know that their serviceable life is 5-6 years, something like that. So
Mhm.
we know we're going to have to buy replacement equipment versus building a building. That's a one and done as far as anybody's projected tenure.
Or a truck that's gonna
Or
last you.
trucks, or
Yeah, something,
vehicles, anything
yeah.
that's durable good that you know there's a projected
But
life.
how does that differ? Because we know we're gonna do that. Are we gonna have certain things in a capital replacement and maintenance plan versus other things in a CIP?
They're going to be all as part of the CIP, but you're going to have a subset of that is this equipment that'll be cycling through. So you wanna be able to build your cash flows, so that you have enough money to buy the same amount as they retire.
Okay.
On it. The other part is that when we start dealing with fiscal impacts of new growth and our proffer policy and tying the amount of cash proffers that would be accepted has to be tied to a pretty rigorous CIP, you can include the replacement of equipment and things into that cash proffer. So it all kind of comes back to that fiscal impact of growth as far as what's in the CIP.
Okay, so you're saying that you're going to have, it'll be part of the CIP, but it'll be managed differently, or it'll be reflected in the CIP. I've got defibrillators here in 2014, and I'm gonna have them again in 2024.
Yes, sir. Or another way is, I'm buying 10 in year 1, I've gotta buy 10 more to replace those in year 5. And that I need to have as much cash projected forward out of the capital fund to do that, and that cash is then dedicated or restricted in year 5 for that acquisition.
Okay, now we talk about these other things, these intergovernmental assistance, or we get grants and things like that. All right, so if we say I get a grant for my defibrillators, and I buy them with a grant, assuming that I'm gonna continue to have these new defibrillators, then I'm gonna end up having to start something new. I've gotta have funding set aside for those defibrillators to be replaced.
As well as the operating and maintenance and all the other kind of things that might be associated.
Understand it. And I've seen that where you talk about a capital item, you've got to adjust for the maintenance and operations cost of it.
Here's one way of remember when I had the information about the capital budget is where the money actually is appropriated versus the CIP, which is a planning tool.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take those defibrillators. We have 10 for $1,000. I'm just
Okay.
picking that number. And that we
Oh,
identify.
I wish. Instead of 30.
$1,000, and we would identify that as general fund dollars in the CIP, because that's the default. I mean, the
Mhm.
county's general
Okay.
fund is gonna pay for that. If we start tracking forward between year 1 of the CIP and the next year capital budget, and we find out John comes to us and says, we're eligible for grants, and we can reduce the general fund commitment by half, because grant is going to pay 500 and we'll pay 500. Well, we will program $1,000 of general fund money back in the future year when we need to do that. And that $500, the net savings, falls to the to the capital projects fund.
Okay.
And is being used. It becomes I know it's, I'm maybe
No,
making
I-
it more
I-
complicated, but it's a cash flow management that you use either general fund or financed dollars, debt dollars, as sources of revenues, and you don't use grants until you're absolutely certain that a grant's coming in.
Now, then you get another thing, we say, all right, I've got a new device to put on the ambulance and it costs $25,000 and, let's say it does something that really, improves the survivability of patients. But we've never had one before. But, it comes on the market and, the marketing people are out here pushing it and meeting up with our EMS people and saying, boy, you gotta have one of these because this is what it does, and it shows up in all of the literature. Okay, so now we have something like this. It's not a replacement, it's a new device, and it's not gonna replace anything else, it's gonna add something to it. How do we pick up on that? We say, okay, it's a new device, and they cost $25,000, and we'll start putting money aside so we can get one in 5 years, or
No, I wouldn't think about setting aside money. Say, we see this is a new device and then each year we update the 5-year CIP so that year one becomes the plan for the next year's budget. Then we shift everything out 5 years. Public safety could come say, and we need this new device, patient safety, risk. We wanna make that a top priority next year. And so they would then bring that into the first year of the 5-year CIP.
and other things would shift out, hopefully not out of their department, out of somebody else's department.
Well,
But
they're gonna have to make some choices of where their what the priorities.
Okay.
And so that, you could always have something, well, let me give another example, with the landfill. There may be something that deals with drainage or something that we need to do. It's not an emergency situation, but we can reasonably identify that within a year or so, we're going to have to do something. Well, we may make that a higher priority just by happenstance because we're updating the CIP, the 5-year CIP. Then once you all adopt that, we take year one, we don't look at any of the other years, and then we develop a budget from that, basically how much money we have to apply. If a project in year one doesn't make it, and we run out of resources before we do it, then those projects would roll forward to be considered in year one the following year.
But anytime we've allocated funds in the CIP, and let's say we allocated it for a truck, and I said, okay, I can run this truck another 2 years. It's in pretty good shape, we didn't do a lot of hard work on it, okay. Then I can readjust, and the money from those funds there falls into the capital general fund, which is now available for anything else in that particular year.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Or, I mean, part of this is, and I don't wanna get fancy by half, but say I'm buying $20,000 pickup trucks. I know if I buy 1 year, now I probably won't have to replace that for 6, 7, 8 years. Well, next year, that $20,000 becomes available to buy another pickup truck that's cycling out. And you do this with school buses. I mean, lease purchases for school buses is a real good technique. It's kind of like a revolving fund. You know, as soon as each year you're buying so many.
So that's where your replacement and maintenance plan comes up with that.
If I show you what, a spreadsheet, I think it becomes more
okay.
clear, but the idea is to set up restricted cash flows to do these equipment, vehicle acquisitions that you know you're going to have to do. And at some point, your maintenance schedule is gonna get more expensive to maintain that, or there's a life safety issue, certification, particularly EMS and fire equipment.
Yeah, one of the things that Brian has talked about, and we talked about a little bit at our retreat, was to set up a capital projects fund, much like the reserve funds or other funds that we have, and have monies flow into that and get basically fenced off, if you will. That's a big change if we do that, and it's one that we're that we need to talk through, okay, what is the policy surrounding that and how does it work operationally? We spent a lot of time talking about that the other day with Brian and Glenda, and there's still some work to be done to sort that out. It's one of those things, it sounds like a pretty good idea if we can work out the details. So.
And there's, I mean, there's some discipline, I mean, I'll be
Oh, sure.
right with that. There's also your ability to change financial decisions because of other circumstances that we can't foresee now. So, but the bond rating agencies, the financial advisors, they see that as adopted policy. Then they check the audits, they check the reports, see if that's what you're doing. I mean, it's one to have a policy versus doing it. And then that certainly will inure to the county's creditworthiness when they start figuring out what kind of, because you are doing this kind of disciplined approach.
Same thing is true with debt policy, having a debt policy that talks about how you use it and when you use it and these kind of things. I mean, you know, we're faced with some issues with the high school and their master plan and those kind of things. And so
Radio system?
Radio system, there's any number of things sitting out there that
911 center.
yeah.
Another technical question. Target a minimum of equity of 10% of the capital improvement plan on a 5-year rolling average. What do we mean by that?
Mr. White, what did we decide? I think we said.
We decided that number 10 is probably not going to make it to the policy table.
That came from our financial advisors and we were,
And nobody understands what it is?
we took some good shots at it.
Yeah, I think we know where he was headed with it, but
Okay,
we
it's not so many. All right, good.
we reworded it to be
We got
something
it.
a little
Okay.
different. So.
All right. Performance objectives and measures. And there's a couple of places you use terms like that. And I'm trying to understand. Well, there's one place you
6-1.
say, on page 4, you say outcomes and the, should be driven by outcomes and the assessment of priorities, vice across-the-board increase. I understand what we don't want to do across-the-board increases. I'm not sure what you mean by outcomes. And then when we get into another one, we say on page 6, program of performance objectives and measures. What are we talking about in those areas?
A set of metrics which tells you whether you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, I assume.
Let me, there's budgeting by, performance-based budgeting where, as Mr. Johnson said, you set up outcomes based on these measurements. We're going to respond to EMS calls within 15
Okay,
minutes.
all right, that's, okay.
Do we have enough?
And you're
trucks
talking,
on
a
the
guy
road?
doesn't have to wait more than 10 minutes in line at for some service or,
And you dial in, now you can go way beyond the measuring. I mean, you can get really kind of in the forest, in the trees, nuts in the forest by measurement. I think a county our size can do some performance-based budgeting. We're not maybe there just yet, but I think budgeting for outcomes.
how many books the library is waiting for?
Versus patrons usage. and-
Okay, all right.
Or compliance in operations like the landfill, where you're
Okay.
staying in compliance with health safety issues and things like that. I mean, so
All
there.
right.
I mean, I agree. We can't swallow this in one
There's
big
a
bite, but
staff-
there are some.
There's a staffing issue to be able to do this level of measurement that I'm certainly very sensitive to. The other thing is out across the board, instead of saying everybody gets a 5% raise to the baseline of their operating budget. Well, that's,
That understood, we did not wanna go there.
no, sir.
And you wanna be able to say, okay, yeah, you're meeting all your requirements with the level of funding you've got today. Okay.
And there's certainly the population correlation, the geographic distribution of that population, particularly
Now,
firing.
I know we didn't have anything discussing much on debt. Do we have any,
Yeah, there's some thoughts there. First of all, you separate long-term and short-term and treat them differently because they're different tools you use for different circumstances. So that sort of is the beginning of the discussion. And
Like the ambulances, we lease purchase those on 3-year terms. And because their life expectancy is gonna be in the 7, 8 years, I think, with a couple box changes. Chassis will run 7, 8 years without an overhaul in the engine, versus a sheriff's cruiser. That's pretty much 3, 4 years and done as far as a road frontline vehicle. It may be rotated down to other uses, but a frontline vehicle will have that kind. So that's more of a cash purchase basis. Long-term debt is the one that's gonna be there for the term of the debt, 20, 30, 25, 30 years plus. The schools.
And on page 4, we're talking about, one of the things we talked a good bit about tax revenue, and if you look at the county's consolidated budget, a fairly substantial chunk of the money comes in from federal and state revenue sharing, or subsidies. And one of the discussions about tax policy could sort of follow the revenue train, starting with you take advantage of or maximize the amount of money that you're due from state and fed. That should be a policy or something akin to that. And then you get into local monies, and it seems to me that monies that come from the economy, whether it's sales tax or certain kinds of business taxes and these kind of things, you want to optimize that to be competitive, but also to get as much as you can. Probably one of the last things that you want to look to as a revenue source, most people think it's the first, but I would argue it's the last, is residential real estate tax. That's the one where you, rather than take as much as you can get, you take only the amount that you absolutely have to. And if you had a philosophy that more smoothly that I just did, sort of created that storyline, I think that's an important mindset if we can get there. And we sort of did when we had our retreat. We talked very much about the kind of government we wanted, and that there is sort of a prioritization in terms of where do we look to for money. And I think that's a subject that we can discuss and see where we go policy-wise.
Are there any other broad policy comments given that?
Well, the state, whether we establish this capital projects fund, that's a big one. If we do that and have the discipline to fund it, the model we have is our reserve funds. And we're very good and very disciplined about putting the money into those reserve funds.
Which means anytime you do something, you got to throw in the extra 18%.
And we do that.
And we do that.
Right.
So I mean, that's
And a capital projects fund, the policy in essence would have to be that once you allocate money to that, from money that's left over from projects or carry forwards or whatever, one-time monies, whatever goes in, it takes sort of a large act to change its fate.
It's crucial that we do that, or we'll end up right back where we were last year.
You don't want to zero out the CIP in order to appear to balance the budget.
No.
Just not a good.
CIP budget's going like this.
Right, and so I think the intent of the policy would be to sort of stabilize that a little bit and be a little more disciplined about, not putting things off so that they get more expensive. So that capital projects fund, that's another big one.
And that's one where somebody's coming in with, the priority of radios, although we know about radios and we're gonna do that. But any of those other public safety issues that come in that are high priority and all of a sudden, because they can bump out, really screw up a program. And if the other area, and we need to think about this, is that it hasn't happened recently, but you have the Department of Homeland Security saying, we're gonna help you out. We're gonna fund emergency responders, and we're gonna give you the money for 3 emergency responders for 3 years.
3 years, and then you get to pay for it.
And then and then you said, okay, do I accept that? Well, yeah, free money, and you gotta ask yourself, would I pay for that out of my own pocket? Because when I get to at the end of those 3 years, getting rid of those 3 people is gonna be very, very hard. And so this,
That's mission creep, as we've talked about.
it's mission creep, and just because somebody else pays for it, on a, I think we're having that as a statewide debate, to some extent.
Well, I remember Mr. White was saying about maximizing state or federal revenues. I would say that it could be, if your levels of service need to be commensurate with whatever your benchmark, population, what have you, just pick population. And so that those 3 first responders, you know, based on trends, that in 3 or 4 years, you're going to have to bring them on anyway, just to keep the current level of service, and here's some funds to bring them on first. That's, you're taking a chance that all things are going to trend that way, but I wouldn't want to say no to those funds if it's an obligation that at some point in any time,
Well,
you're going to.
you come back to the question, would you hire those 3 people if you had to pay for them? And you might say, yeah, based on my population projections, I need to staff another ambulance in the county. Therefore, by the end of 3 years, I need to have that, so I would buy the people now with other money. But that's a trap that you can get suckered into with this idea of free money.
Well, it's not free. You'll never hear me say it's free. So.
Well, it seems free when we're talking about us having to raise the taxes versus the state or the feds.
The other big policy area is the one about debt. How we, I think there's a discussion about short-term debt, and then there's a discussion about long-term debt and how that gets used and when you do it and these kind of things. I mean, you can't predict the future, but I think you can set some benchmarks as to how we will go about making the decision in those areas, and I think that's an important thing to sort of get out there, because right now we don't have, we're not anticipating new debt in the very near term, but there's some things sitting out there that we know we're going to be facing with the school master plan, the 911 center, radios, and
fire station.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, there is a list that is there. So
Not inexpensive either.
And that's right.
All right.
So on an upbeat note, there's Savannah, Louisa, potentially Albemarle, all about all the same code position we are on radio systems. So there could be some definite efficiencies, at least from design specifications. So,
Well, especially if we are able to bring in school system, Lake of the Woods, Town of Orange.
Broadband.
Right.
Commercial broadband.
Yeah, now that's,
but I'm
how are you doing down there, Mark, with broadband? you still,
Not where we were, 4.5 years ago.
Okay, I remember.
Just to pick a number out.
Okay.
Just a random number.
but
Not
that's
an actual
all
way better than here, just a random number, so.
I picked up on it early that broadband was a priority.
It is. I have some of the worst areas in the county.
Wow,
Really bad spots out there.
So do I.
And I thought that your dial-up at your place of business was sort of a frustration to you.
Well, I got rid of that a long time ago.
Did you?
I've got satellite, but that's
Not cheap.
that's better than dial-up, but it ain't.
Yeah.
It's not broadband.
Okay.
Well, as you can see from this discussion, there's still a good deal of work to do on these, and that's why
All right.
I grabbed Mark before the meeting started and asked him if he'd be willing to jump into this. I think it'd be a good reintroduction to where this board is on the one hand, and there's still work to be done.
Well, he'll learn a lot about our retreats in terms of
Well, that's the
how
thing.
we
Yeah.
got into that.
And so I think somewhat reluctantly, but still agreed that he would do it. So
No,
that would be
I'm up for it.
that would be my proposal is the next step, is that we grab it off. And,
We would bring this back when it's ready to be brought back.
yeah.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. Any question on the information items?
Well, they're not discussion
Don't get me
items,
started.
but I don't know if you're trying to slip them through as an information item, or they should have been on the discussion item.
Well, at least
Okay.
just broach one subject on the agenda format.
Yeah.
This was one that we were kind of struggling with, of where did it fit? And there could be an opportunity, and if the board is open, that we may be able to re-engineer, certainly can work with the chairman, on agenda format to make it a little bit clearer of what's discussion, what's action, what's old business, new business. I think having a county administrator report where a lot of the kind of departmental information can flow forward, not removing the board of supervisors comment period, public comment period. But this is one instance where we were kind of trying to figure out where this went, and it wasn't an easy fit. So I just offered that. If there's any interest in me working on an agenda formatting, I'm certainly prepared to do that. I'd be
Well,
free to launch into all of the other stuff.
Brian and I have talked about this a little bit, and you know, this agenda format is, with only a couple of changes, is the same as it was 19 years ago when I first went on the board. We've added the consent agenda, which sped things up. We no longer sit here and go through the bills one by one, which sped things up considerably. But yeah, speaking for myself, obviously, I would say, yeah, let's let the county administrator bring us some ideas on ways we can streamline the agenda so that it makes it a little clear what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Works for me.
Well, what was your purpose in putting these zoning ordinance drafts on?
I think I know the answer. They went to the planning commission the other night, and they didn't want us to be.
I think he was trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Why don't we take, I guess, the special events and so that you can understand certainly from the planning director and the county attorney. I certainly was part of that, kind of what the genesis is, why.
I thought that was gonna just get scratched and.
No, sir,
well-
this was not trying to hide anything.
No, my,
Passing
I don't mean to cut you off, Brian, but the reason I brought those to you at the same time I brought the planning commission, because I'm trying to bring us, the two bodies, keep you all on the same page. With regards, and that's why it's on here, as an information
This is
item.
still a moving target, so.
Yeah.
No, I'm the moving target. The language is just what I bring up to y'all, but no, I
Not
hear
with the
it
right
is,
scope.
it is. And we're not even ready to go to, the public hearing. We are for two of them at the planning commission level, but not for special events, because clearly Tom and I realized we had more work to do with special events. And I believe that came out of a result of the board's direction to come up with something. That was about, a month ago or so?
Well, and I mean, in looking at this, it is basically information. If you were at the planning meeting, okay, well, it kind of tells you what they looked at. Just to give us more of a heads up of what's coming. Of course, it's not ready, but.
Well, I got a couple of questions. Not that I'm ready to debate the thing, but I notice under the events, you cross out a whole bunch of things to be considered in terms of various impacts of the events.
The events
Just-
thing is DOA at the
Yes.
planning commission.
Should've
So
been
we're
followed
actually
on our
rewriting
agenda.
all of that.
Okay, all right. So,
Well,
I mean, I just,
Let me follow along with that, because when Brian talked about reordering the agenda, and an idea that I would like to float out there is, in the past, going back to the beginning of time, either staff would come to the board and say, we've got this problem, do you want us to work on it? And the board would say, yeah, or else the board would go to staff and say, we got this problem, work on it. And staff would go and spend a lot of time and come back with a plan, and very often, it's not the plan the board wanted. So staff has spent all this time working on something that the board was not in favor of. So it seems to me, and I guess I've had a lot of time to think over the last few years, seems to me there should be a vehicle for the board to be able to, like in a work session environment, talk about some of these things. You know, and sort of flesh out a starting position so that when staff starts working on it, they kind of have an idea of where we're going and what we're looking for, instead of just kind of throwing it in their lap and expecting them to read our minds and know what we want.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how that would work, but I think that would be, I think that's kind of a missing part of our process. A lot of times the board doesn't deal with these things until they've already been printed in the paper as being on the agenda, and we start getting calls from our constituents, and we've never really, we may have said there's a problem, but we haven't identified how we'd like to fix it.
Well, and in the past, sometimes there's been two different versions of the problem. And it's sometimes we can't get consensus on this thing, and so we throw it in their lap, and they come back, and we still don't have consensus. And maybe we're at a point where we can get some of these things, at least when we do give them some guidance, there's a little more consensus.
Well, I think one thing that's helped us is the retreats, because we've more narrowly defined what we all agree on, which gives staff a much better direction on what, not necessarily what we want, but the acceptable realm of what we can work in. And it may bounce from one edge to the other, but
It's something that you can't be done in 10 minutes.
I think the good thing about what the retreats do, what I see the difference is the retreats kind of deal with the big overall picture.
Right.
Whereas if we had a monthly work session or whatever, then we could deal with the odd things that spring up that they aren't part of the overarching our policy for the county as a whole, but they just deal with individual situations like people panhandling outside of Lake of the Woods. I mean, that's an example.
Well, we have another good example coming up now, which is short-term disability for the staff. How are we gonna deal with that for the people that have been on board earlier than January 1st? I mean, there's an issue that we've got to reckon with. And I agree with the basic principle that I don't like asking staff to do something until we've had a chance to at least, I mean, we did a little bit of it tonight on the financial policy. We didn't get very far into it, but have that kind of discussion and let staff
Well,
at
that's
least hear it.
Part of the reason I was trying to get at least my thoughts out there so that I didn't bring them up when they had the finished product.
And so I think Mark is right, that, you know, we should be very careful about burning up a lot of staff resources, until there's been at least some level of direction given based on the discussion that the board has.
Well,
In a work session kind of, I mean, we could almost do I don't know how long it would be, but it's probably not 5 minutes, a work session on this short-term disability issue. And it's hard to do it when you're trying to plow through an agenda
Right,
like this.
exactly.
You need to do it as a work session.
well,
Let me, County Attorney and I talked about this, and certainly works for Powhatan County. They do this, and it's kind of a standing thing, and I know a number of other counties, boards will do this. Say for our structure, we start at 5, and here we go. But if you were to convene at 4 one time a month, the first meeting or second.
well, damn it, that's what we just got rid of.
Pick a different number. Pick a different number. Any number.
405?
You start the meeting at 6, and convene at 5.
There you go.
But some hour preceding a regular meeting, where an hour is to work on issues, there's no, and it's clearly
there's no
communicated.
vote,
There's no action taken, it's open, it's taped, it's more of an informal environment. In fact, in some communities, they'll sit around in a conference room, they won't sit at the dais. It's that, and you work through this issue, it's a kind of a safe harbor, if I could put that, for you all to vet these ideas, for us to be able to come to say, we've got this issue, for you all to receive briefings on matters that may be coming before you in the past, or actions you've taken and things that are not really appropriate. And I'm stretching here, but that would be for the formal meeting. And the formal meeting is really to receive public comment, input, to take official actions and those type of things. And that the work session is just a time to start generating some of this work.
well, and you could have some of the discussion items where there's enough definition of what's there to be able to because like tonight, we had a couple of discussion items, and that pushes us up to the next step of staff action.
Well, I mean, if that's something y'all wanna do, if we meet at 4 o'clock, both meetings,
How about 6? Both meetings.
right in the
Mr. Chairman, I didn't say propose another night. I was trying to propose
No, I'm just
yeah,
saying, but
I
not
wasn't
one
going that
meeting or the
far.
other, but you do it both. There's enough crap where we can spend an hour yik-yakking.
Okay. I was just doing one.
I don't disagree with you.
Realistically.
Whatever y'all split, I mean, we're here to serve. kind of.
Well, I would suggest that it would be a good compromise, and we all like those, schedule a work session, at 4 o'clock if it's needed. I mean, there's no point in doing it if there's nothing to deal with.
Yeah,
Jim, can you live with that, Jim?
4 o'clock in the summertime on a farm is prime time,
Well,
which means I have to stop at 3, so
Yeah.
that's my only issue.
well, I've got the same
December, I
issue.
won't argue with you at all.
Unfortunately, changing tires, you get quite dirty, so I
Yeah.
can't leave my job and come straight over here. So
You wouldn't want me to leave mine
there's a
coming
lag.
straight over here.
Nor you either.
Especially when
We'll move them at that end of the thing.
We'd be sitting over here against the wall.
Jim, especially when you have the long glove. on.
Yeah, that's right. and it breaks.
You're right. We more urban
The
people.
long glove. Been 10 years on the board, that's the first time the long glove has been used.
It's a new board. No, I'm flexible. I really am. It's just
The hesitancy was, I mean, you all just went to a 5 o'clock start, and I think it's moving along quickly. We haven't had any public hearing. And the idea is, but this gives us at least a structure to be able to work on some of these things in a more informal way.
Well, but if you had a particular topic that you think we need to do, then we can go ahead and schedule a 4 o'clock meeting. But that we would do it based upon the specific rather than once a month.
Yeah, we handle it much like we do the budget works sessions. When we need one, we schedule one. I mean, we try to predict them.
I think it's fair to say that probably there's gonna be at least one every month that you could need. Don't you think,
Yeah,
Ryan?
sure.
Yes, sir.
Because it can be multiple topics. It doesn't have to be a single
Right,
topic
exactly.
discussion.
I mean, let's take the financial policies. I see coming back with those in a draft form for you all to vet at a work session before it comes up for action. I think the legislative priorities as a draft coming before in a work session.
Short-term disability.
Short-term disability, we've ticked off 3, so.
We haven't even gotten.
And we're almost
in this department up here.
We haven't even gotten the text amendments.
Yeah, or budget.
That's why I said you're virtually,
Well, budget, of course, I mean, and that's the thing, we've always used work sessions in my memory, we always have work sessions for the budget. And it
But there
just
are
makes
other
sense that
topics that
you need some work sessions for other things, so.
But I think that's important to really focus on not sending the staff off to do something until we've got a consensus. And I think we're in a position now we can more likely get a consensus than just a disagreement that we can't resolve.
Yeah, send them off to get another rock is not productive. I've been on both sides of that, and to go get me a rock is no fun. You always bring back the wrong rock, I assure you.
you're just not going to the right rocks.
I don't know my rocks, I know.
All right, so
Okay.
I think what we'll do, at least for the 26th, you may have a work session by then for maybe financial policies or things like that, but we'll certainly work through scheduling of that. The standing time will be 4 o'clock as needed, and then we'll schedule appropriately. And I'll work with the chairman on what are the topics that we're going to do that.
All right. I don't know if you get beyond much more than one topic.
So we're not gonna talk about text amendments tonight, huh?
Well,
I
Well,
think
the first one is being rewritten.
Yeah, the first one was dead, so we're trying to revive it at this point.
Right.
and make it-
And let me ask a simple, quick question here on the, with regard to penalties. Are all these underlined areas new?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay,
Our current penalty ordinance is one paragraph,
okay.
and almost all of that is straight out of state
And
code.
so we can solve, you say most of this is out of
Almost all of it's just verbatim, cut and paste from various state code sections.
Oh, okay. So
And-
now this
and-
is gonna solve all of our penalty problems, with all
Yeah, I was
this
gonna say,
extra ordinance.
is there one or two sentences?
Work session.
Yeah. That,
Okay.
about, sort of as a background for this?
Yeah, the summary of it, which I can give you in about 90 seconds, the summary is currently if somebody has a zoning violation, Greg issues them a violation notice, and the only way to enforce it is to file an injunction action in the circuit court, which is a long, drawn-out, tedious process and doesn't motivate people. State law allows us in the alternative to issue summons, basically like a traffic ticket. So what Greg, the new way I've drafted it, Greg would give them a notice, 20-day cure period. If they don't cure it in that 20-day period, he can just write them a ticket, a summons. And then you'll actually, it works just like a traffic ticket in court. You'll have a court date, in fact, it looks the same. They'll have a court date, and it'll be in general district court, which is nice and quick. And then they can go, just like you go challenge your traffic.
And he doesn't even need to be a conservative of the peace, does he?
Doesn't need to be conservative.
No, we made him a highway.
Yeah,
We just
that's
think
where
a
the bus
200
runs over, yeah.
We think a $200 or $500 fine will be more motivating than this lawsuit that might get you into court a year from now.
Well, immediate is better.
And so we had discussed this briefly, and we put the couple of the board members were concerned that they have a grace period, and so we put 20 days in there as a grace period for when the time Greg notifies them, they get at least 20 days. And it's in his,
I
he
don't
doesn't
have
have to issue the ticket the next day, but he can.
I don't have a problem with it in principle. If that helps in terms of where we go.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly for some of the more egregious violations, I think he needs a toolbox that works. You gotta, you know.
You got a water pistol, he needs a 45.
Yeah, but you also don't wanna use the 45 when you're, when it's not called for.
Well, one of my observations, and I said that, and this one wasn't all that controversial with the planning commission. One of the things I told the planning commission, I'll tell you guys, in working with Greg bends over backwards to try and work with citizens and help people get their problems solved. So I don't think we're clamoring to issue summonses to people,
Yeah,
but it is a tool because we have a couple of cases where the people just basically tell us to fly a kite.
Just blow you off, yeah.
And, and the way this works, it's $200 first offense. Every 10 days that it's not resolved, we can issue another summons, $500. So at the end of a month, you've accumulated a $1,200 fine, and you gotta go to court. And we're hoping that will be more motivating to people to solve. And the thing we deal with the most, I think, is junk and debris in the yards where they got more than 200 square feet of junk. Those have been the most common problem where people tell us to fly a kite.
Roll-off boxes where they shouldn't be,
Right.
year after year.
Very common, I mean, just obvious.
What about the subdivision change? I mean, as I read through this, I thought I was gonna read changes that were being forced by state code, but then it looked like it went beyond that. Maybe
No,
it didn't.
it's maintenance, it's more maintenance. One example, I believe it's 54-147 or 148, where it refers to a phantom section of the ordinance, that it refers to a citation that goes nowhere, it doesn't exist. Those sorts of things. And
All
we
right,
want
so
to,
there's both some state compliance things going on
and minor
and
maintenance.
some cleanup.
It's nothing that's gonna affect minor maintenance issues or from a subdivision agent's perspective. It's just minor things that need to be cleaned up, tighten up some of a couple of definitions, but it's nothing earth-shattering. It does not go into any sort of division policy whatsoever. And it reflects back to a general memo I submitted to the board in March of this year that reflects the General Assembly's actions on the preliminary plat. That was really the nexus of this whole amendment. And the planning commission was fine with it, and I told them regarding that and the penalties that I was going to schedule something, a public hearing for them on September 4th, as to reiterate again, Tom and I are gonna rework the special events. But, you know, again, I gotta take some of the blame for this because my intention is to just keep the communication going, you know, what I'm doing with the planning commission, and just to let y'all know what they're doing as well. So.
Oh, no, I'm fine with that. I think that's a good thing. I mean,
Yeah, and it would certainly help, and quite frankly, you know, if I'm going down the wrong path, then, you know, y'all need to tell me before I, you know, just say don't go down that path. Just, you know, let's talk this out, and if there's an issue, you know, you can give me some direction, or say don't bother.
Well, that's where it went for, it's an information item. Do we have any questions? Yes, so we got to get up here, the two people that dealt with it all.
Okay.
Right.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything on the calendar or the committee reports? In that case, I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
Second.